Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with G.I. Joe vs. Transformers Volume 3. Previously, a celebration of peace was called off due to declaration of war, as Serpentor's Decepticons laid waste to all in their path. That is until Optimus Prime surrendered himself. While the Earth-forged android dealt with an existential crisis, his hostages got themselves freed, and more G.I. Joes are geared up and ready to bring their friends home. Issue 5's cover is surprising. Surrounded by Insecticons and Constructicons, Hawk is holding the Matrix of Leadership, glowing with energy and the ground beneath him giving way. The only logical explanation for this is that he's using the Matrix to absorb a Kamehameha wave from a tiny Goku off-screen. I may not have gotten enough sleep last night. Picking up from the very one-sided fight, Optimus slams Serpentor into the floor, demanding his surrender. But the android won't quit until he's dead, and he doesn't think the Autobot has the servos to go through with it. Serpentor downloaded data on the Transformers straight from Soundwave's disembodied head. How did he miss the fact that Optimus punched a hole through Soundwave's chest way back in the first crossover in this continuity? Don't get me wrong, I'm not a huge fan of the borderline bloodthirsty Optimus Prime we've seen in the Michael Bay movies, but if an enemy that barely measures the size of his index digit gets crushed in the heat of battle, I don't see the big bot crying in his energon over it. Decepticon backup arrives, knocking the truck bot off his feet, and one even sticking his sword in his leg.
Give it up, Prime! You can't beat all of us! Watch me!
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Prime proceeds to knock these suckers back, even pulling the Predacon's sword from his leg and using it against the lot of them. Meanwhile, Serpentor is still reeling from his earlier assault, having received more damage than he'd thought, with an open socket in his neck and diagnostic warnings of a foreign programming error. All the more reason to get himself that Matrix. While taking a beating, Prime contacts Hot Rod to confirm the hostages are free, so his forces can make with the Blasty Blasty. And they're already joined by the additional G.I. Joe forces.
Yo, Joe!
Under different circumstances, I might call something like this rushed. Like, they could have used another page where the Joes transport to Cybertron, a jumpy newbie sees the Autobots, trains his weapon on them, but Flint lowers it for him, saying that they're friendlies, something you'd kind of expect. But the story already established that the Warp Gate had the preset coordinates of the Gladiator Zone. We already saw the Joes ready and raring to go, so it wasn't entirely necessary to have that anyway. And the sudden appearance of them all heading into battle makes for a really awesome splash page. Inside the bunker, the former hostages are putting up a fight when a lizard bot I don't recognize attacks Hawk, saying they have Prime, and when Cybertron belongs to the cons, he'll have a fembot harem of red ones and blue ones, which, I don't know, just seems very peculiar. And it opens up a heap of uncomfortable questions, not the least of which is, we haven't seen any female Decepticons in this continuity, only Autobots. And since they're apparently descended from slaves, like I said, uncomfortable. Anyway, Snake Eyes jabs his shrapnel sword in its eye and frees Hawk, who says they have to go save Prime. At first I was going to criticize Hawk using 2 handguns against giant robots, but they prepped for this mission, so I imagine that there might be specialized handguns with ammunition that can be effective against Transformers. But the bigger issue is, something I've mentioned before, the fact that he's got his guns tilted like this, which is very impractical, and kind of silly considering this guy was supposed to be a highly decorated military man with the credentials to lead this international special mission force. Grimlock threatens the last con standing with being taken apart if he doesn't reveal where Prime is. The enemy doesn't believe an Autobot would do such a thing, but Grim is a Dinobot. Different rules, which he explains after ripping his arm off, then saying his head is next.
No disassemble.
Even his Autobot allies are surprised by this, which would imply they've never seen the T-Rex interrogate anyone before. Meanwhile, Prime lies battered on the ground, and Serpentor doesn't look much better,
the latter regretting that it has come to this, but hey, Prime turned down the less violent option. Using his tendrils to pry open his chest compartment, the usurper hopes that he'll evolve from a weapon into Cybertron's greatest leader.
Arise, Serpentor Prime, arise!
Okay, fun callback to when they introduced Serpentor in the TV series in an arc called Arise, Serpentor, Arise, but that name is never gonna work. The suffix has to be US, so it should be Serpentis Prime, based on the singular but flimsy evidence that Hot Rod became Rodimus Prime. Okay, now I'm certain I didn't get enough sleep last night.
Another slick, full page of a whole lot of action happening outside, just as poster-worthy as the previous one. Guns blazing, Triptychon in the background, explosions, the teams motivating each other. It kind of makes me want a crossover movie done in the style of the old shows, but I still can't overlook that Storm Shadow is there. It's all fun and nostalgia until a blue beam fires into the sky. What is that?
It's the Matrix.
Look, if it means Serpentor's taken possession of it and transformed into a more powerful being, that's one thing. Just don't let it open up yet another death portal in the sky. I think we've all had enough of those.
Sure enough, the coveted totem did the trick, transforming Serpentor into a Cybertronian-sized, living mechanical being with a spark, and the wondrous sensation it all comes with. And he immediately starts expressing regret for his actions. The Matrix gave him the epiphany that Prime had previously tried telling him. The lives he's taken, and nearly taken, make him feel worthless, and he says Cybertronians should live in peace. He takes Motormaster's gun and puts the barrel to his face, intending to end his existence so the Matrix can return to its rightful bearer.
Now, this turnaround is kind of iffy for me. On the one hand, it kind of makes sense because the Matrix bestows wisdom throughout the ages, so even though Serpentor worked hard to get it, he is realizing that he was wrong, and it also makes clear why Prime is so committed to preserving life and freedom. What is essentially a greater power deems it necessary. But what kind of kills the mood here are what the visuals lack.
Sure, Serpy's new look is cool and all, but we don't see his face until the last panel on the page. It's either shadowed or too small, or not shown at all. It's a little difficult to feel the emotions he's struggling to deal with, understand his decision if we can't see some kind of expression to match what he's allegedly feeling. It could have been fixed if we had a couple more panels, no dialogue, of Serpentor's face transitioning from joy of success, then the thrill of actually being alive, then reflection on his actions, sorrow of having done what he has in order to get where he is. These are powerful emotions that act as the catalyst for him almost immediately rejecting his cause on a dime, and could have been better represented.
They could have tried playing Stan Bush's The Touch while he took the Matrix, but I don't think that would have changed anything. As unbelievable as that might sound.
That neck injury from earlier seems to act up, then he laughs while ensnaring his minions in his tendrils.
So much power in the palm of his hands, and the fool would have given it up. Absolutely pathetic.
My initial feeling to this moment was that Megatron was taking over, but no, it's Cobra Commander. Thanks to a virus delivered to the android in Issue 1, the blue-hooded loon is now able to control the Matrix-powered Serpentor from his computer lab.
And now, every bit of knowledge and power gathered up by these glorified GoBots rests in the hands of Cobra.
Wait, did the GoBots exist in this continuity? Do the Transformers know about this? Because I think I'd like to see the reaction of these giant alien bots seeing a less well-received version of themselves having existed in pop culture media.
Planning to conquer both Earth and Cybertron, and seeing a near-dead Prime, Cobra Pentor decides to scrap him as his
first act as Supreme Master of the Universe.
I'm sorry, before you can be considered for Master of the Universe position, you had to pass a screening test headed by a sword-wielding barbarian in a loincloth. Weird how in 2 panels, this crossover between 2 80s toy icons have made offhanded references to 2 other 80s toy icons. What does Harvey Dent think of all this?
The Autobot recon team and their Joe allies bust in, which CC is actually pretty thrilled about because now he can kill Hawk and Snake Eyes. Like, specifically those two, and I'm not sure why. There wasn't really anything in the previous crossovers to suggest that they did anything personally to him or anything distinct from any of the other Joes that were fighting him. Kind of like in the first issue where he said he hated Bumblebee the most. Does he just hold a personal grudge to whichever hero is in the room? Maybe he just saw those two first, and that's why he didn't include Roadblock or Scarlet. Anyway, Snake and Grim charge ahead, but just as Prime is warning them who's really controlling Serpentor's body, they get knocked aside effortlessly. The others don't fare much better, leaving RC the last Autobot standing, as Cobra muses about how much he'd have loved to pummel Starscream and Megatron with his bare hands. Though wouldn't that mean his bare human hands, not Serpentor's? Anyway, they're already dead, and the Fembot doesn't really care. Points for being the first one to land a punch on him, lady. Well, Hawk tries to get help from Prime, who looks like he's literally falling apart. RC, by her own words, dedicates ripping open her foe's chestplate to Bumblebee's memory. Before she's crushed, Optimus throws Hawk at the Matrix, the Joe hoping he'll outworthy the commander.
Hawk, no! It's too much for a human!
Well, what did he say to convince you to throw him in the first place? Did he say he was gonna tickle the Matrix out of the cavity or something?
A funky light show starts playing out of the Matrix, out of Serpentor's eyes, Duke's eyes, and the human's dialogue bubble even changes to have a mechanical effect, though not as pronounced as the Cybertronians. They're engulfed in light for a moment until the Matrix falls to the floor, as Serpentor and Hawk lie motionless. Note one's body emits a hissing sound. A Decepticon wakes up, not sure what's going on except that he plans to waste Optimus Prime, until he's shot in the chest by Lady J, arriving with Hot Rod to declare the cons defeated and the war over. And I guess she swished vehicles in the heat of battle, because that's not what she was driving before. In Siberia, Dr. Knox is unable to get a response from Cobra Commander, apparently now in a catatonic state. An undetermined amount of time later, in Cybertron's capital, as rebuilding efforts begin, Scarlet is retrieving Snake Eyes for breakfast, apparently with RC synthesizing it. Not sure how that works, but moving on. He sticks a note to her back, deciding to continue their game of tag without their mechs, which now has a more flirtatious connotation. Roadblock is regaling his auto buddies with the time his fellow Joe Barbecue ate 27 red-hot chilies, which I'm not sure why Perceptor finds funny, but he does. And Grimlock apologizes for looking down on his human allies, admitting they aren't just great warriors, but great friends as well.
That being said, Grimlock still can't help Scarlet move couch thing, whatever that is.
Prime is all repaired, but should avoid anything strenuous, according to a medic that looks just like RC, but repainted for St. Patrick's Day. His narration/log entry notes how he's got the Matrix back. Their enemies are once again defeated, but not without cost. Meanwhile, Hot Rod, Ultra Magnus, and RC visit a memorial for Bumblebee.
For those who were lost, we will commit their lives to our memory, to remind us that our battles must be chosen wisely, so that none ever die in vain, ever again.
Boy, is it that an alien robot is more inspirational than real people leading real-life countries. Optimus Prime for president, and his running mate, DS9's own Benjamin Sisko. Just get Peter Cullen in a Halloween costume. Doesn't even have to be a good one.
As he continues how Autobots and G.I. Joe will face new threats in the days to come, we've seen Dr. Mindbender in Cobra log gear with freaking Unicron in the background. There's a nod to a potential future conflict involving character designs from the short-lived G.I. Joe Extreme cartoon. The 90s were weird, people. Prime's entry ends with him admitting awe for the humans' passion for existence, short as their lives are, and now that apparently a live Hawk is one with the matrix of leadership, not only will that same passion live on to be shared with future Cybertronians, Hawk will use the knowledge available to him to lead humanity into a new golden age, something Prime will be honored to archive.
And that was G.I. Joe vs. Transformers Volume 3, The Art of War. It's definitely enjoyable, not just for the nostalgia, but I have to admit it feels a lot more hit or miss than the previous installments.
The shakeup with Serpentor's creation fits the continuity well. In a world where Cobra discovered the Transformers, it kind of makes a twisted sense that an engineered creature like Serpentor would have a similar angle to him. It's an example of an update on a character that is different, contemporary, but still maintains key elements from the original. It's its own universe and not trying to replace or rewrite another one.
Which is better than I can say for certain other stories Tim Seeley's had an involvement with that had reboots of their own.
The twist of Cobra Commander hijacking Serpentor after he'd achieved his goal was, I thought, very well done. It fits with Draped Face preferring a path to power with little resistance and keeping himself out of harm's way, directly speaking, even if it didn't quite work out that way. And I guess I was mistaken about something in the first issue. I thought Zartan used the same basic device to knock out Serpentor and Bumblebee, but if you look closely you can see that they're actually quite different. So it's not outlandish to say that while they had similar effects, the one used on Serpentor was initially supposed to upload the virus and it had the after effect of temporarily disabling him. I was pretty shocked that Hawk survived his encounter with the Matrix, and him being united with it could be very interesting.
Maybe the only other idea they had for this was to have a non-medical professional look at him for a second and declare that he'd fallen into a coma.
There were elements to Serpentor that made him a complex character, such as having reverence and respect for his opponents, but other things seemed more like confusing rather than complex. He got mad when he was compared to the much less merciful Megatron, yet he throws around the fact that he's basically Megs' offspring like he was passing out party favors. He claims he won the loyalty of the Decepticons through respect, not fear, but his program Pappy was stated in the beginning as instilling fear throughout the galaxy. So it kind of feels like a contradiction, doesn't it? And if you ask me, so does saying that he doesn't have a cause to fight for. Am I missing something, or wouldn't wanting to bring order to a chaotic universe kind of count as a cause, even if it's just an approximation of Megatron's? Maybe as a non-living being he can't genuinely care about it, and the inability to care was touched on, so perhaps those 2 points kind of cancel each other out? I mentioned the lack of impact on Serpentor's sudden change of heart following taking the Matrix, but that wasn't the only time that emotional moments fell flat. Sometimes expressions like Roadblock when Bumblebee was crushed just seemed off, and overall I feel that was rather unceremonious for the character. But for Serpentor's arc, it would have been a good time to see his blank expression, then compare it to the kind of sorrow I mentioned when he upgrades later. In short, there are moments that feel like they're building to a serious emotional payoff, but they don't quite nail the landing. This isn't unique to this story, however. The first crossover was a little shaky in that regard, too.
Really, I think it's a good thing that Hawk survived, because with the question kind of lingering in the air, the playful and joking attitude of his crew was feeling kind of inappropriate.
Also, when and why did Storm Shadow join G.I. Joe? He exchanged one look with Scarlet at the end of Volume 2. Was that supposed to be the basis of an entire heel turn? Does he just not have that famous feud with Snake Eyes in this universe? I get that events will happen between these stories, but he was on the side of the enemy. A little elaboration would be nice. For that matter, why is Cobra Commander singling out Bumblebee, Hawk, and Snake Eyes like they did something to him personally, when there's been no indication of it? It seems like they're trying to allude to some vendetta or grudge, but the substance just isn't there. And were Bumblebee and RC supposed to be an item? Because all we got of that was him flirting with her. She responded with one remark. That was it. So when we see her crying at the end, it just doesn't really feel like much. So I have to ask, what was the point? Given Prime's closing line indicating that this human-Cybertronian alliance is going to be a continuous thing, does that mean the Joes can keep their not Power Ranger Zords after all? As with the 2 previous crossovers, the art remains solid, vibrant colors and just the right amount of detail for the Transformers. Though, as I said before, there are some expressions, or lack thereof, that throw a few moments off.
When it's all said and done, this isn't much worse or better than the previous volumes, and there is still the matter of not necessarily getting to know some characters all too well, but you probably won't be too bored with it while reading. Though my biggest problem was the fact that there was not enough Lady J. You monsters. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.